Okay. Today's Yomi is Sanhedrin Yud Tes, and it's dedicated for Shemir for the Chayalim, Atzah for the Shvuyim, and a Yeshua for Am Yisrael on this Eis Tzara. We're going to start on 19a, 5 lines from the top, or 6 lines from the top. Mace lo mace, it said if the Kohen Gadol has somebody who dies, according to a mayor, he doesn't follow the coffin, he just stays the block behind. And once the coffin goes in one block, he goes to the block before it, around the corner. So he doesn't come to touch it. Because it says in the Torah, well, it means when it says in the verse about the Kohen Gadol, he never leaves the temple, it means, excuse me, it means he doesn't leave with them. But he goes after them. He follows them. Hold on one second. He follows a block behind so that he doesn't come to touch it. He goes a block behind him. Basically, he goes a block behind. Yeah. Question, Ezekiel? Well, the cemetery can be outside the city or it can be in the city, but it depends where it is. Depends. Right. What do you mean by the city? If let's say Mount Olives and you're in the temple and they bury you on the Mount of Olives, that's like a 5-minute walk, but it's outside the city. So the Gemara says, okay, Yotze Pesach, it goes only until the gates of the city. Whereas that's the position of Rabbi. Whereas Rabbi Huda says no, he doesn't leave the temple at all, because it says when a mikdash lo yetze. Rabbi Huda says he doesn't leave the temple. It says from the temple he cannot leave. So Shapir Kama Rabbi Huda. Rabbi Huda is saying the same right thing. So Rabbi Meir, no, if that's the case, if it means he can't leave the temple at all, Yachi will base namilo. And well, then he can never go home. This is what it means. And a mikdash lo yetze, what does it mean when it says if you don't leave the temple? Miktusha so you don't leave your holiness. Miktusha so you don't leave the holiness of the temple. Meaning to say you never become tamei. So Rameir says since he's around the block away, he's always around the corner, he's not going to come to touch it. Rabbi Yehuda says no. Agav marire delma mikri. Since he's so upset, he's in a state of sadness, he's going to may possibly forget and he'll come to touch it. Because Menachem, when he comforts people, it says in Mishnah, when he comforts people, the Brisa says when he comforts people, we learned in the Mishnah, when he comforts others, then everybody else goes on the one side, his assistant's in the middle, and he's on the right side. So the assistant is between him and the people. Tanarabanan Kashu there, Bishura, when he crosses over in a line, when he crosses by the line to comfort the mourners, Skanamu Shiach Sha'avar. So the assistant and Meshuach Sha'avar is a person who was like a temporary Kohen Gadol, or he was at one point a Kohen Gadol and he's been retired. They're on his biyamino, they're on his right. Rosh Beisav Avela Mekoa Mismolo. And the head of the watch of the Kohanim and the mourners and all the people are on his left. When he stands in the line and is comforted by others, then the deputy is on his right, and everybody else is on his left. But the Kohen Gadol, who was Kohen Gadol in the past, he doesn't come to comfort him. Because we think that you have to be sensitive, and we're worried that the Kohen Gadol, this will make the Kohen Gadol upset because there's some jealousy, there's some tension there. Savar kachadibi. We might think that maybe he's rejoicing in my distress. Amar Papa Shmamina mehamas nisa plus. We learn from this Brisa 3 things. Shmamina hainu skan hainu mamuna, that the skan, the deputy, another name for that is the mamuna. And we know have another thing is that the mourners stand and the people pass by the mourners Nowadays, we do it differently. We have the mourners walk through and everybody else stands. And the third thing is Shema Minah, Avelim was small, Hamanachim and Haim owned them, that the mourners stand on the left of the comforters. At first, the mourners were standing and everybody was passing by. And there were two families in Jerusalem that were fighting with each other. Even at the Levaya, they were fighting. This one says, I want to go by first. I want to go by first. They made a decree that the people stand over him. And that's what we do today, that the mourners pass by the people while they're standing. Amar Rami bar Abba, Hilchsir Rabbi Chazer v'Holcha Siper Sima. Amar Rabbi Abba, Hilchsir Rabbi Yossi as a Davro Yoshna Mitzipori. Rabbi Yossi returned the matter to its original status in Tzipor, that the mourners would be standing over him, and all the people would pass by. Amar Rami bar Abba, his good Rabbi Yossi b'Tzipori. Rabbi Yossi established Shalote Isha Malachas Bashok Uvenachara, that he also established in Tzipori that the woman should not walk in the marketplace with her child after or Misham Ma'aseh because of an incident. Rami bar Abba, his good Rabbi Yossi b'Tzipori. What was the incident? The incident was because that one time they took the child and they kidnapped her, waiting for her to come into the house to get the child, and then they assaulted her. So therefore, they made a decree that the woman should always have the child walk in front of her. And women always have to be talking in the bathroom. You ever wonder why women talk in the bathroom? That this is why, so that they know that there's not alone and a man doesn't come in. Maybe another person will go there, and if he doesn't hear the sound of a person, he'll go in and he'll be secluded with them. So therefore, they always have to be talking so that nobody else could go in. Amar Menashe bar Abba Shaili says Rabbi Hoshaya Rabba b'Beis Alman. I asked Rabbi Shaya Rabba b'Beis Alman. Beis Alman means the house. It could be a place, or it could mean the house, the eternal house, which is another name for a cemetery. Beis Alman de Hutzal. V'Amali ain't sure pechusa me'asar b'nei Adam. When you have this row to comfort the mourners, you need at least 10 people. You need a minyan. And the mourners there are passive; they're not part of it, so they don't count as the minyan. And here Rashi says this was taught to me that there's no difference in the custom whether the mourners are standing or whether the mourners are passing, but the ones passing by. Either way, it's okay. When he comforts them, it says in the text, when he comforts the others, everybody says, "We are your atonement," and he says, "You shall be blessed." When he comforts others, what does he say? What does the Kohen Gadol say? You shall be comforted. What do you mean? They're not in mourning. What is this referring to? If it's when others comfort him, he says to them, "You should be comforted." Is he like wishing them bad? He's saying, "You should be comforted." What do you mean? They're not in mourning. What it means is when he comforts others, he is saying to them, "You shall be comforted." Meaning to say, that's what he says to others when they're in mourning. He says, "You shall be comforted." Shema Mina. So then the Gemara tells us the following. Melech or Dan v'lodan. So from this point on, the rest of the chapter is dealing with the king. We're now stopping to deal with the high priest, and we deal with the king. Well, many interesting laws about a king. So Amar Rav Yosef, we say a king does not judge, and we don't judge him. This Rav Yosef al Malchei Yisrael. This only refers to the kings of Israel. Of Malchei Beis David, Dan v'dananoso. This actually relates to the Ramban in this week's parasha discusses the distinction between a king of Judah and a king of Israel. The kings of Israel were a rogue kingdom. They were a breakaway kingdom. We don't count them. And so therefore, kings of Judah, they were the real descendants of David, so we count them. So the kings of, when we say you don't judge and we don't judge them, they don't judge him, we don't judge them. That refers to the Malchei Yisrael. But the Malchei Beis David, but the kings of David, we judge and they can judge. They'll say Beis David Kamar Hashem Dinu Levoker Mishpat, because it says about we already had this pasuk cited in Malachim Dam Zayin. The kings of David judge every morning. V'lo dainin alei, and if we don't, and v'lo daininan, v'lo daininan, we have to just change the text here. V'lo daininan lahu, and if we don't judge them, or inu hechi dayani, then how can they be the judge? Meaning to say that in order to be, if we don't judge them, how are they able to judge others? Only someone who's able to be judged can judge others. So what does it mean? The kings of Israel, why are they not allowed to be judged? Well, my time there was an incident. The servants of King Yanai killed someone. Amaru Shimon ben Shetach. So Shimon ben Shetach. Now, who is Shimon ben Shetach? Shimon ben Shetach was the Nasi for the Sanhedrin. Now, the wife of makes it a little bit more complicated. We know from the Gemara elsewhere that the wife of King Yanai was the sister of Shimon ben Shetach, and so therefore, it's his brother-in-law. But it's not necessarily the case that he was his brother-in-law, because it's possible that they got married after the fact. But anyway, there might have been some tension in that relationship. So says, okay, well, we have to judge a guy, even though he's a servant to the king. Now, his servant doesn't mean like it was his housekeeper. It could be like his secretary of state, who was a deputy of King Yanai. So Shochue, they sent him, Avdecha Katal Nafshe. He said, your servant killed somebody. Shajulu. So he sent to them his servant. Shochue, so they sent him, Tan Namilacha. You also have to come here and stand judgment. Because it says, V'hu Ba'al of Amra Torah, about an ox, it says the owner is considered. Yavu Ba'al Shor V'yamu Al Shora, that the owner of the ox has to come and stand in front of the court if his ox killed someone. No, also Yosef. So Yana and the Melech came and he was sitting. Amoy Shimon ben Shetach. So Shimon ben Shetach said, Yana HaMelech Amod Al Raglecha V'ya'idu B'cha. So he says, Yana HaMelech, you have to stand up and testify. So Shimon ben Shetach said, you have to stand up. You're not just standing for us, you're standing before God. So you have to stand up. Amalo, no. Look, Shatam Mer, Yanai says, you know what? I'm going to see if there's anybody else, if everybody agrees with this position. Let's see what everybody else says about this matter. Now, like you say, let's see what your friends say. So then it says, Nivnel Yamino, Kavshu Panam Bakarka. They turned to the right, those guys buried their face in the ground. Nivnel Ismolo, they turned to the left, Kavshu Panam Bakarka. They buried their face in the ground. Amar and Shimon ben Shetach. Shimon ben Shetach was very upset. He says, Ba'al Machshavos Atem. He says, you think that you are you're people who are of great thought. Yavo Ba'al Machshavos v'Paramikem. Let one who has the thoughts of everyone come and punish you. Meaning, say you're afraid of Yanai. And so therefore you're not giving the proper ruling. And you have to give the proper ruling. Miyad ba Gabriel v'chavtam nekarka v'mesu. Gabriel, the prophet, came, struck them down, and they died. But Osa Shah Amru, Melech Lodan no so. At that moment they said, a king does not judge, or we don't judge him. So. You had a question? There's going to be more. You'll see. You can write it down because we taught about this. Well, they're very interested in this, I'm sure. All of them, well, because they weren't judging. They were afraid. What's the point of being a judge if you can't speak honestly? Well, a king does not do chalitza, and he does not. Well, if you remember that shear, then share it. Well, chalitza will chalitza ishta. They don't do chalitza. The king does not. The woman, the widow, does not remove his shoe and spit on the ground, and you don't do chalitza to his wife, and he doesn't do yibam, and you don't do yibam to his wife. Rabbi Yehuda says, if he wants to, we remember him for good. Says the Gemara, Aini, is it really the case that the king can waive his rights about chalitza or yibam? Amar Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi say, king can't waive his honor, even though a Nasi can, a king can. And it says, it says, place upon yourself a king. No, yeah, the king can't waive his honor. It says mitzvah shani. No, this case is different because this is for a mitzvah. This is the mitzvah of yibam or chalitza. It's the mitzvah, so therefore the king can waive his honor in order to do the mitzvah. They know sin amanusa. You don't marry the king's widow. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says a king can marry another king's widow because we find by David that he married the widow of Saul because it says, I will give to you the house of your Lord and the wife. I gave to you the house of your Lord and the wife of your Lord in your bosom. The Gemara is going to bring a brisa where it says, how do the sages respond to that? Because it seems from the pasuk that David did marry Saul's widows. So Tanya Amrul Rabbi Yehuda, it doesn't mean that God gave actually Saul's widows to David, but rather it means Nachem Haruuyos Lo Mibeis HaMelech. He gave him women who were permitted to him from the house of the king. Mind, they knew who are these women? These were Saul's daughters, Merav and Michal, that they were the daughters of Saul and David married them. And that's what the verse is referring to. So, Shaul Talmid of Rabbi Yossi, and so the student says, Rabbi Yossi, how did David marry two sisters while they were still alive? You're not allowed to marry two sisters while they're still alive. You're allowed to marry one sister, and then when she dies, you can marry another sister. That's what Ariel Sharon did. But how can you marry two sisters while they're both still alive? So Amroan, Michal Achar Mesas Merav Nisa. So first answer is, Rabbi Yossi said that he married Michal, the second one, after Merav died. So let's just remind everybody of the story of Merav and Michal so we don't forget. When the Jewish people were fighting with the Philistines, there was Goliath, and he was cursing the Jewish people, and he said, and Shaul Melech was very upset about this, so he said, whoever will kill Goliath, I'll make him very wealthy, and I'll give him my daughter as a wife. And so David killed Goliath, and Shaul said, I'm going to give you Merav, my daughter, as a wife. But in the end, he didn't give Merav to David, he gave Merav to Adriel. And then afterwards, Shaul said, I'll give you Michal, my daughter, to David, but that's only if you bring 100 foreskins. So David killed the Philistines, and he brought their foreskins to Saul, and so that he gave him Michal as his wife. And afterwards, Shaul wanted to kill David, and David escaped out the window through Michal's help. And after David escaped, Shaul gave Michal to Palti ben Laish. And when Saul died, he put Avner put Ishbosheth, his son. And afterwards, when Avner got upset about Ishbosheth and he wanted to go over to David, but David said, no, don't come back to me until you bring me back my wife, Michal. And also, David said to Ishbosheth, give me back Michal, which I had betrothed with 100 foreskins. And then Ishbosheth sent her, and he took her away from Palti, and Avner brought her to David. So this is the background. So the Gemara says, first answer is Rabbi Yossi that Michal was after the death of Merav. Rabbi Shulman Karcha says no, different answer. Kiddushay Taos Hayulo b'Merav. No, David never really married Merav. It was a mistaken betrothal, as it says, Shenemar Tanan as Ishti as Michal Asher Rasti li b'Mea Arol Pushtim. Give me my wife Michal, who I betrothed with 100 foreskins. My Talmud. What does that mean? Papa Michal Ishti Merav. It means Michal is my wife, but not Merav. So that proves that there was a problem with Merav. My Kiddushay Taos. What was the mistake he made with Merav? Whoever will kill the Goliath, the king will make him very rich. Also the Katle, he went and killed Goliath. Amrlo. So Saul said to David, Malva Islacha Gabai. you have a debt with me. But we know I'm a kaddish b'milva and a mekudeshes. You can't betroth the woman by just forgiving a loan because we assume the loan was spent. So therefore, also Yahweh Adriel. So Saul gave Merav to Adriel. They'll say Ve'ahiba tated Merav bat Shaul with David, and he gave her along to Adriel. So Amrei Ibayas that Teimlacha Michal Zil Isili Me'aros Bushim. So Saul says to David, if you want me to give you my daughter Michal, give me 100 foreskins of the Philistines. Although Isili, he went and he brought 100 foreskins. Amarle, Milvo Pruta is Chadavai. So he says, I'm not just giving you the loan, but rather I have a loan and a Pruta because he says, now you owe me because I said I'm going to give you a lot of wealth, and also now I have the 100 foreskins, and that's worth money. The foreskins are worth actual currency. As you'll see, you can feed them to an animal. So he says, I'm betrothing you with the loan that you owe me, and also the foreskins. Shaul savar milvo pruta date milva. Shaul thought David really had in mind the loan. David savar milvo pruta date pruta. No, he had in mind on the pruta, and so therefore that Michal was betrothed. Vibai same or alternatively, kuyama pruta daita milvo pruta daita pruta. Everybody's at a position. It's a loan and a pruta. The intent is on the pruta. Shaul savar. Shaul said, no, these 100 foreskins, they're not even worth a penny. And David Savar, the Chazal Kalbushin, I can give it to the dogs or the cats, it's worth something. So Rabbi Yossi says that Michal was married after Merav died. So Rabbi Yossi, hi to us, Ishti is Michal, my darshpe. So what does he do with the fact that he says, give me Michal as my wife? What does he do with this? Rabbi Yossi Tameh, the Tanya, Rabbi Yossi Darish, Mikros Mu'aravin. Rabbi Yossi expounded the verses mixed up. Ksiv Vayikach HaMelech HaShnei B'nei Ritzpa B'asaya Asher Yaldo Shaul Asarmonias Mi Pipoches As Chameshes B'nei Shaul Michal Asher Yaldo Adriel Mecholti. So the Gemara says V'chila Adriel Nitnel Halol Palti Ben Laish. Michal was not the one given to Adriel. Merav was given to Adriel. Michal was given to Palti Ben Laish. Nachtev Shol Natan Es Michal Bito Bash Eshes Tavila Palti Ben Laish. Ela Makish Kedusha Merav Adriel Kedusha Michal Palti. Comparison. Makidusha Michal Palti Bavera. Just like Michal was given to Palti, and it was a sin because he had already betrothed Michal. Av Kedusha Merav Adriel Bavera. Also, Merav was given to Adriel was a sin. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karacho, who says that Merav was not his wife. Nami Aksivet Chamesha B'nei Michal Batshal. What does he do with the fact that it says in the verse, the 5 children of Michal, daughter of Shaul, that were born to Adriel, when we know Merav is the one married to Adriel? Now, Amalek Rabbi Yeshua, Michal Yalda, Merav Yalda. Michal was not the one who gave birth to them, Merav did. So Merav Yalda, Michal gave them. Merav gave birth to them, and Michal raised them. Bikach Nikru al Shema. This is the source for adoption. Therefore, they're called by her name. Whoever raises an orphan, it's as though you gave birth to them. Chanina Kara Yochanan Ishto Elazar Gula Shmuel Belimud Stima. What's the source for the idea that one who raises his friend's child in the house, it's still he gave birth to him? The children, the neighbors gave a name to this child, saying, "You are Ben Naomi." That offspring was born to Naomi, and who was that? That was Boaz, not Boaz. That was the child. The child. Who was the child? What's the child who was born to Boaz? And Ruth was. What was the name? Ovad. What's the? Yeah, I think it was Ovad. Does it say there? Of Boaz and Ruth. Ovad. Okay, I think it was Ovad. I just join the blank. But the chronology. Yeah, but Ovad gave birth to Yishai, but who was the one? Was Ovad the child of Ruth? But they called him the child of Naomi. Naomi didn't give birth. Ruth gave birth, but Naomi raised him. So therefore, therefore she was called by his name. Yochanan says, Me'achav, Ishtu Ayudis Yaldas Yered Avigdor. It comes from the fact that it says, Kaleb ben Yefuna's wife Yehudis gave birth to Yered and Avigdor. Ve'ela b'nei Bitya Basbar. People sometimes call the daughter of Pharaoh Batya, but actually her real name was not Batya, it was Bitya. The Sherlakach married that Bitya. These are the children of Bitya, the daughter of Pharaoh, that she Sherlakach married. Who married as Kelev. That Kelev married Kalev, married the daughter of Pharaoh named Bitya. Married. Why was Kalev called married? Shemar be'etzas meradim, because he rebelled against the advice of the spies. Bitya Yolda, did Bitya give birth to Vigdor and another name for Moshe was Avigdor, and we'll see Chaver. The Bitya give birth to them. El Yocheva Yalda Bitya Gidol. Fikach Nikra Shema, and therefore she was called by. Therefore, Bitya was called the mother of these children. Memorazer says, "Me'acha Gaalta Bezra Amecha B'nei Yaakov Yosef Sal." This is a different source of idea. Whoever raised the child that's though he gave birth to him, says you will redeem the force of your people, the children of Jacob and Joseph. Meaning to say, these are the ones who left Egypt, the children of the tribes. Yosef Yalad, did Joseph give birth to the tribes? Yaakov Yalad, Jacob gave birth to the tribes. Ella, but it must mean that Yaakov Yalad Yosef Kilkel. Yaakov gave birth to them and Joseph supported them. It says though Joseph gave birth to them. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonasan, Kol Malame ben Chaver Torah. Whoever teaches Torah to his friend's child, Mal Avakos of Kil Yolado. As though he gave birth to him, as it says, Ve'ela told us Aaron and Moshe, that the offspring of Aaron and Moshe. V'ksiv, Ve'ela Shmos b'nei Aaron is the offspring of the children of Aaron, and it never lists the offspring of Moshe in that context. Omarcha Aaron Yolad Moshe Limid. Aaron gave birth and Moshe taught them. Therefore, they're called by his name. And the Gemara says, so if you teach Torah to the children, it's as though you raise them. That's why that's why it's often said, if somebody has no children, they should give money to educational institutions, and it's as though those students are your children. If somebody has no children, then you give money to educational institutions. Therefore it says, so says Hashem to the house of Jacob that redeemed Abraham. Where did Jacob redeem Abraham? He redeemed him from the distress of having to raise children, because Abraham was supposed to have to raise all these children, and Jacob took that away from him by raising him. I don't say, that meaning to say, because he has no reason to be embarrassed from Abraham, because he redeemed him and he saved him from the distress of having to raise children. So the Gemara says we'll just do a couple more lines. We'll stop. The Gemara says we have a contradiction. Ksiv, it says that Shaul gave Michal's daughter to Palti. Ksiv and other places called Paltiel. I'm Rabbi Yochanan Palti Shemo. His name was Palti. Paltiel Shepilto. Why was he called Paltiel? Because God saved him from a sin. Now, because Michal was living with Palti, but she was married to David. So Palti could have sinned with her. What did he do? He stuck a sword between him and her. And he said, whoever engages in relations will be struck down by this sword. So wasn't it Yichud? Tosfos asked the question, but wasn't it Yichud? How's he allowed to be on the same bed with her and not sin? Tosfos was a very, very big bed. Very big sword. Vaksiv Vayechita Isha, and her husband went with her and he was crying after. But it means he was her wife. No, he acted like her wife. He took care of her. He was crying. Why was he crying? Al mitzvah da azil mineh. He was crying because he no longer had the mitzvah of being able to withhold himself from her. And then it says he walked after Ad Bacharim. Shanasu shneim kebacharim shlo tamu tambia. That no, they were like young people that they never tasted the taste of the relations with each other. All right, we'll stop here. God willing, pick this up. You had a question? Beautiful daf. Tomorrow's daf will only be after we're only